Greetings and welcome to episode 62 of CultureWatch Radio. I'm Mark Rabick and with me is Bill Muhlenberg. Good day, Bill.
Great to be with you again.
And your latest article is entitled Good and Bad News on Trans Tyranny and Terror. Bit of a tongue twister there. First, let us talk about the trans movement and what it is. It seems the left apparently have a bit of a habit of pushing things that are destructive or deconstructing things rather than building things up. Is that how you feel?
Yeah, well, I think that's a fairly good observation of the way the left has been going for the last few centuries. Well, we know things like Marxism and so on has often been a revolutionary faith to tear things down. We got to destroy the old system. Even the so-called New Left, of which I used to be a part back in my wild youth, same thing, to tear it all down, destroy it. If we want to make a better world, we have to first destroy everything. Critical theory is all about this. Criticize everything, show its faults. Don't worry if you have something better to replace it with, but just keep hammering how bad everything is. So, last century, 1 million plus people killed in the name of godless communism. That's a pretty good indicator of the destructive power of the left. So, yeah, the latest madness, the whole trans agenda, it's also about destruction, isn't it? Or at least the attempt to destroy things, reality, biology, women's sport, those are all under attack massively. So, talk about a destructive political ideology. The left seems to be expert at pushing this, and the trans revolution is certainly part of it.
So what's the good news that you're reporting in the article?
Yeah, well, we do get good bits now and then. Today, all the press was talking about how one major sporting body, FINA, the international swimming body, had met just recently. Some 150 member nations voted on a new policy having to do with men competing in women's swimming events. As we know, we've got characters like Leah Thomas, so-called the swimmer, who of course did lousy all of his life as a male swimmer, but now that he's come out proclaiming that he's a female, he's been winning just about everything he does. Well, surprise, surprise, put a guy in a girl's swimming suit with all the unfair advantage that he has, and guess what? He's going to keep winning. So FINA finally met to discuss this, and there was a 72% agreement of member nations that a new policy must take place. It's detailed. There's a 24-page policy, but the gist of it is simply that, for the most part, no more males competing in female swimming events. So that's a good start.
So we had a figure of 72%. I have to wonder what the other 28% were thinking. How do you think this is going to potentially influence other sports? Is this perhaps the beginning of a pushback?
Well, we hope so. And as you say, 28%. What's wrong with you guys? I mean, this should be a no-brainer. This should be 110% agreeing with the policy. But anyway, we'll take 72%, I guess. Maybe the best we're going to get. And I suspect, by the way, most of these were lefty, trendy Western nations who did vote against it. But yeah, it's got to have an impact on other sports. It's not just swimming, that's for sure, that men are having unfair advantage as they pretend to be women and are just creaming the female opposition. Could be wrestling, tennis. You can have, even in Australia, we got football, basketball, where we've had guys coming in claiming to be girls, absolutely crushing the competition, boxing, you name it. We've had real female boxers carted off an ambulance to hospital after some guy beats the, living daylights out of her because he's pretending that he's a she. So I think this is just the beginning of what is hopefully a real return to sanity, that a lot of sports start looking into this It's just not fair. It's not right that guys who are obviously different than girls, bigger, stronger, bulkier, bigger muscular system, the whole bit, they have an unfair advantage if they're going to compete with women. So that's why traditionally pretty much all sport has been, male or female. You didn't combine them because it would just be a wipeout. It would not be fair to women. So the whole trans movement has been a war on women's sport. So thankfully, a bit of, common sense in the world with the FINA decision.
So, Bill, give us an example of how the FINA decision will be influencing the swimming world.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, it's already got a lot of press and a lot of reaction. All the usual suspects, right? All the lefty trendies screaming about discrimination and bigotry and hatred, But those most impacted, right, the athletes themselves, most of them are celebrating this decision. In fact, I quote one, a fairly famous English, former swimmer who has been, pushing this for ages. Sharon Davies actually said that she and some 60 other Olympians have been writing to the IOC and others for years now saying, come on, we've got to get back to the science. We got to stop this political nonsense and get back to what the science and what the evidence says. So she's over the moon right now, and she's been speaking out saying, we need something that's going to be fair to both sexes. And she was quite thrilled with the FINA decision. So I think we'll see a lot more of these athletes coming out, certainly the female ones, saying, hey, this is good stuff. It's a great start.
So the second half of your article talks about the bad news. What is that?
Well, there's always plenty of bad news. Sadly, probably outweighs the good news 10-1 on a given day. So the FINA information today in the press was great news, but it's offset by all kinds of stuff. In fact, I looked at 3 major things that just happened in the last day or two. I've done hundreds and hundreds of articles already on the trans revolution. So, you could do this every day. Just give the bad news of what's happening. So in my piece, I look at 3 events. First one being the infamous Tavistock gender clinic in London, which there's been a bit of a rethink finally, which is, that in itself, that's good news as well. Basically, the piece I think it was in the English Times, started by saying since the past decade or so, since around 2010, there's been a 5,000% increase in the number of teenage girls being referred to the Tavistock clinic, which is usually go the whole hog, get the treatment, the puberty blockers, the hormone, the surgery, lopping bits off, trying to add bits on. 5,000% increase. Where do you think all that's coming from? Do you think all of a sudden, these 3 and 4 and 5 and 8 and 10-year-olds are thinking, I'm trapped in the wrong body. I really am not who I was born as? Or is that being pushed on them by radical adults, even often, sadly, parents who should know better? They're really abusing their own children by agreeing with them. Oh, you're the wrong sex. It's like agreeing with somebody who's, anorexic, saying, oh, yeah, you're right. You're really fat. You're overweight. You need to lose more weight and eat less, right? That's a good way to kill somebody who's already quite skinny. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So the good news on this is, as I said, a lot of the former patients and some of the staff, including some current staff, are starting to speak out and say, wait a minute, this is wrong. This whole thing is madness. It's kind of like some of the old things we used to do, lobotomies and the like. Instead of having good medicine based on good science, we're just rushing with madness here. We're letting the activists call the shots. We're letting emotion trump reason. And when you get to people, who actually even work at Tavistock saying enough is enough, this is bad news, it's bad for kids, Well, that's a little glimmer of hope as well amongst all the bad news.
Recently, I read a story about a woman who had had surgery when she was 18 and she was now 27 and had very much a change of heart and mind on what she had done and regretted it very, very, very deeply, and spoke in graphic terms of what it actually meant to her, that she didn't have a voice which sounded female anymore, and her body was now radically different. And there's other stories, like you mentioned one in the article as well, and things like going to the toilet, things like that we take for granted. How do we make these stories of the reality of what's actually being pushed compared to the glossy media spin on it all? How do we make these stories become better known?
Yeah, well, that's crucial here, certainly to warn off anybody who's contemplating heading down this path. The mainstream media, of course, is not running with these kinds of stories. There are, in fact, what we call invisible people, right? Back not all that long ago, blacks were invisible people, non-persons. Today you could look at, the unborn, right? How often do you get a hearing for the unborn? What about their right to life? Ex-homosexuals would be another clear category, and I know many of these personally, people who heavily in the lifestyle now have left, gone on, marriage and family. Nobody's telling their story, and it's the same here. There's basically a whole new growth industry called detransitioning. Think of a few others, getting tattoos removed, right? That's a growth industry. Self-storage, a lot of money being made there. Well, the whole movement today with, tens of thousands of people are, though, as you say, those who are unsatisfied, unhappy. They were sold a bill of goods. They were told it'd all be sweetness and light, and it's turned out to be hell on earth. They know now that it was wrong. They were basically forced into it. All the adults in their lives pushed them down this track. Nobody was giving them an alternative story. Nobody was warning them. So the best warnings we can now give is with these detransitioners. So I've included one of this, really sad and graphic story in my piece, but there's so many more. I mean, I've got hundreds of articles on trans over the last few years, including quite a few of these testimonies, and boy, they're real shockers, people who've been there, done that, and come back and, left that whole scene, but now with all the regret, most of this is irreversible. You cannot undo many of the physical changes, the operations, the surgery, and so on. You're scarred for life, literally. You cannot undo what's been done. That and add all the psychological, emotional problems. So simply the story I give, the little bit of the story I shared, such a shocking story, that's why it's on my website. I'm going to share it. We all should. We got to get the word out. We got to tell others. This is not the panacea it's been promised. In fact, it's created hell for so many people.
I guess as Christians, we should be looking too at what we can offer in terms of hope for people and how we can speak personally to people who might be in our lives either looking towards this kind of thing as a solution or coming out of it with the realization of what they've done and that great level of regret. How would you, as a final thing to say for today's episode, how would you act towards these people? What sort of things do you say? What sort of hope can you offer them?
Yeah, good point. And with so many of these hot potato social issues, cultural issues, I usually do a two-pronged approach. One is simply give them the facts, give them the data. Whatever the topic, abortion, homosexuality, the trans agenda, you need to give them information, real information, which, again, the lamestream media is overwhelmingly not giving them. So give them the data. And in my new article, for example, I include a very important social science research paper that was just released showing that minors who do receive the cross-sex medical interventions, in fact, are not getting a reduction in suicide rates, but they're leading to higher rates of suicide among young people. So that's the kind of information, that's the fact, the truth we got to share with these people. If you're considering doing this, hey, you need to be told what is really going on, and it's actually going to be a lot worse and not better if you go down this path. So first, give them the information, and again, we can just deal with secular science and medicine, just share what they are in their more honest moments are reporting. But yeah, obviously as Christians, we have a second pronged to the attack, and that is we have a God who's a God of change. He transforms lives. Sure, in this case, we can't undo all the physical damage, the physical bits cut and pasted and all the rest. That cannot be undone. It really is a kind of a mutilation of the body, but we can change the other things, the mental, psychological, emotional, which, by the way, are the main reasons kids are messed up here like this. They don't need the physical changes, the operations, the surgeries. What they need is the loving and wise counsel from those who care about them to say, look, what your problem really is primarily is an emotional one, psychological, mental. You're unhappy. You've been fed a bill of goods about who you are, the way you were born, and you need help in those areas. And we can give you that. We can give you counsel. And more than that, with good counsel, we can pray for you. We can introduce you to a God who changes lives, who turns lives around. So that's really the good news. That's where the hope is. You don't have to be this way. You don't have to go down this dead-end path, which so many tens of thousands are now deeply regretting. But you can get help now. Christ is in the business of helping people, changing lives, giving them hope, giving them healing, giving them health. That's the Christian gospel. That's a huge part of what we're on about. And that's the very message we need to share with others.
Well, that's a great way to finish today's episode. Thank you for today.
Thank you.
And there's much more at the Culture Watch website. Join us again next time with another episode of Culture Watch Radio.